I want to touch on this a little bit further because I'm going to hand up and acknowledge that we live in Toronto. We are more interested in
I'm
the
glad
Raptors.
you could admit that you live in Toronto.
We have.
Good job.
Listen, we have some bias here. Both of us do. We want the Raptors to win. There's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
We are guilty sometimes of caring too much, I think, as a fan base of whether the Raptors are getting enough credit or not and what that actually means. Like Dan put that in really great terms, I thought, where he said, it's 2 more wins and it doesn't matter. Nothing. It's only going to be about the Raptors, and there's going to be a million Raptors pieces. And
here's the other thing too is the Cavs and LeBron James win that title, and yes, you know what, Draymond being suspended for Game 5 is a part of that, but nobody takes that away from them.
No, of course not. And again, not overly concerned about the credit and the asterisks and the what the Warriors don't have or whatever, blah blah blah. But this to me has been building for a little while, just because that game was very difficult. From the standpoint of what I've been continuing to drive home is that the Raptors played so incredibly well, and there was very little. Dan's piece was one of the only ones I saw run on Kyle Lowry nationally. I didn't hear any podcast really talking about Kyle Lowry or about Marc Gasol. And yes, maybe it is because they are just there. But every series to me has felt like, since Orlando, which no one was paying attention to, obviously, but the Sixers series was all about Embiid, and he's sick, and what is he dealing with, and how many minutes can he play? And, oh, you know what? They're just that's if he would have been healthy, if they would have got good Embiid, maybe they would have won that thing. And Raptors kind of got lucky. It was a rim bounce, and maybe the rim bounce doesn't happen. They go to overtime and lose. The Bucks, it was, they were just too young. Giannis just isn't quite there yet. He's just not quite ready. He's not willing to be the superstar that he's going to be at some point in his career. Maybe later. That Bucks team is so interesting. Maybe later. The Raptors just kind of took advantage of a team that didn't have a lot of playoff experience, and Mike Budenholzer didn't play Giannis enough, and this is what they left on the table. And now it's kind of the same thing where the Warriors are beat up, and it's just, the Raptors are expected to win. The Raptors are supposed to blow out this Warriors team, even though, again, it is Steph Curry and Draymond Green and Andre Iguodala in that game, and that Klay Thompson now has only missed 5 quarters of the 10 that the Raptors have won so far in this series. But sure, fine, all of these different things. And I'm just getting a little tired of hearing about what the other teams don't have or what they're missing and not what the Raptors have done. And especially when you are considering that, they've put together now 6 games against the Bucks and the Warriors. They've won 6 of the last 7 games against the Bucks and the Warriors. And it's never really about the Raptors and how they're doing this and how incredible it is.
We're consuming different stuff, I think, because I'm
consuming everything. So I legitimately am what they call, I think, a hyper user or a hyper consumer, where all I do is go home, scour the internet, listen to every podcast on 2 times speed.
Yeah.
I think I have a pretty good
that's my
understanding of what's out there,
listen
bro.
to one podcast.
I'm just saying, I think I have a pretty good understanding of what's happening here. I think I'm qualified to make this assessment.
All right. That may be true. And maybe part of that is, United States against Canada bias and trying to get the clicks from your country.
I don't even think it's that.
But I think there are, smart people realize that there's lots of clicks north of the border, even if you are an American writer or broadcaster.
It's not about creating a piece that is hey, the Raptors here. Those things are out there. There's content everywhere. I'm just saying that the major narratives have never really been. There's been a little bit of how Masai has put this together. There's been some of talking about the Kawhi Leonard trade and his run. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, those have been the focal points of what the Raptors have accomplished here. And it's been very, very little else when we've discussed these series or when people have kind of laid out exactly what has happened in these things. That's all.
Yeah. And part of that is there's interesting players. I think what Dan said is true.
Yeah,
there's interesting players on this team, but nobody's... I made the joke about the burner account, but literally that stuff isn't happening. And I think what best speaks to this is Kendrick Perkins, his tweet after the conclusion of Game 3. I witnessed something very scary tonight after the game. Toronto were walking back to their locker room after the game, and nobody was celebrating, and they weren't smiling or nothing. They boys want the smoke. Take it from another champ. They're just going about it in a professional and calm way. There's no off-court stuff. There hasn't been all season long. There's been nothing. There's been no leaks. There's been no backbiting. There's been nothing you could even misconstrue. It just hasn't existed. And the Warriors' injury concerns is a major storyline.
You know what else? It's that, yes, of course, the Warriors thing. I will say this, though, that one thing about the Warriors storyline that bothers me is that's always been the caveat to the Warriors, is that when you sink a ton of money into these superstars and it takes away from depth in a salary cap league, that we always said, well, what if the Warriors lose Durant? And we're seeing it happening to them. And there's no like discussion around having a more balanced team or having like building your team a little differently. Like they did give Sean Livingston money. They did make these decisions. Like these are what the Warriors have done.
Do you think that the conversation is the same if it's just Durant? Because I don't. Like I think if Durant missed the entire series, but Klay Thompson played through.
What do you mean? The whole story was about Durant in this whole series.
The whole purpose of having Durant and overloading on superstars instead of depth is that you can afford to lose one superstar. Imagine any other team lost a superstar, the likes of which of Kevin Durant. They're done. I just think that you are underestimating how big you're almost forgetting how big the Kevin Durant storyline has been. The whole thing has been, if there's KD, like waiting for KD. I saw a Deadspin headline today that I think was actually kind of accurate. I didn't even read the piece, but it just made me think about it, which was Kevin Durant is ruining the NBA Finals. And I was like, yeah, because there's all this every day. It's like, is KD going to play? What's KD up to? Did he have a setback? Blah, 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 blah. I'm here at this point to enjoy the games, and I'm here to break down the games. Too. And I'll say this. This is what I think is the problem in terms of the Raptors from these narrative standpoints. The Raptors look like a finished product. They are a team of veterans. There's no upside here. We live in a culture in sports now of upside and what's next and projecting to the future. And, hey, who's going to sign where this offseason? Like, we can't just live in the moment ever with sports. Like, it seems so difficult to do. And I get it. Like, we're smarter now. We have more information. There's tons of content. There's way more places. It's tough to live in the moment with anything. We get distracted easily. So when you look at the Raptors, it's not, well, can Danny Green get better? Can Fred VanVleet get better? Is Norm Powell going to take the next step? Is Marc Gasol or Kyle Lowry? No, like they are a finished product. Pascal, maybe.
This is sure, but he's one tiny piece, and that's been done. Like, but even then, it's like he's the guy that people like.
Maybe
because
OG.
There's more upside. OG hasn't played in the entire postseason.
So he's going to be better.
So who do you want to talk about OG? I'm just saying, take this seriously because this is a real topic.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why that is such a big thing, but it's definitely a reason as to why Toronto wasn't talked about more. It's like you don't get to say the things about Giannis where it's like this is all part of an evolution. You're watching the evolution. It's like you're watching this like one finite run.
And that's another thing that Dan said, talked about the change, right? Like that there's change, that there's pliability, that there's people in and out of the lineup even. Mm-hmm. Not just, the projecting and the getting better or adding something and looking different the offseason. Like there's none of that. Like this team will definitely look different with or without Kawhi Leonard in 2019, 2020. But on a day-to-day basis, they're stoic, they're rocks, and nothing changes.
Yep.
It's like the box score looks different game after game. But other than that, and maybe the way Nick Nurse deploys some of these players and starting at Fred VanVleet in the second half, but generally it's pretty like we have a pretty good sample size of this team in the postseason, and we know what to expect.
It's 7 really good vets, 7 like solid players, 1 superstar, and some guys that have been fluctuating a little bit in their play. But ultimately, over the last, again, I would say 8 games have been pretty consistently good.
Yeah.
1 bad quarter.
Yeah, they had a bad
1 bad quarter, 1 5-minute stretch in the fourth offensively.
Yeah, and
John 3-0.
John Shootman had it. They've won 8 of the 10 or 10 of the 12 quarters so far. I did my math right because 4 times 3 is 12.
Good job by you.
Thank you.